All right, we're doing Circe by Madeline Miller, Chapter 9. It was morning, the sun just over the trees, and I was in the garden cutting anemones for my table. The pigs snuffled at their slops. One of the boars grew fractious, shoving and grunting to air his authority. I caught his eye. Yesterday, I saw you blowing bubbles in the stream, and the day before, the spotted sow sent you off with a bitten ear and nothing more, so you may behave. He huffed at the dirt and flopped on his belly and subsided. Do you always talk to pigs when I am gone? Hermes stood in his travelling cloak, his broad-brimmed hat tilted over his eyes. I like to think of it the other way around, I said. What brings you out into the honest daylight? A ship is coming, he said. I thought you might want to know. I stood. Here? What ship? He smiled. He always liked to see me at a loss. What will you give me if I tell you? Begone, I said. I prefer you in the dark. He laughed and vanished. I made myself go about the morning as I usually would, in case Hermes watched, but I felt the tension in myself, a taut anticipation. I could not keep my eyes from flickering to the horizon. A ship with visitors that amused Hermes. Who? They came at mid-afternoon, resolving out of the bright mirror of the waves. The vessel was 10 times the size of Glaucus's, and even at a distance I could see how fine it was, sleek and brightly painted, with a huge rearing prow piece. It cut through the sluggish air straight towards me, its oarsmen rowing steadily. As they approached, I felt that old eager jump in my throat. They were mortals. The sailors dropped the anchor, and a single man leapt over the low side and splashed to shore. He followed the seam of beach and woods until he found a path, a small pig trail that wound upwards through the acanthus spears and laurel groves, past the thornbush thicket. I lost sight of him then, but I knew where the trail led. I waited. He checked when he saw my lion, but only for a moment. With his shoulders straight and unbowed, he knelt to me in the clearing's grass. I realized I knew him. He was older, the skin of his face more lined, but it was the same man, his head still shaved, his eyes clear. Of all the mortals on the earth, there are only a few the gods would ever hear of. Consider the practicalities. By the time we learn their names, they are dead. They must be meteors indeed to catch our attention. They're merely good. You are dust to us. Lady, he said, I am sorry to trouble you. You have not been troubled yet, I said. Stand if you like. If he noticed my mortal voice, he gave no sign. He stood up. I will not say gracefully, for he was too solidly built for that, but easily, like a door swinging on a well-fitted hinge. His eyes met mine without flinching. He was used to gods, I thought, and witches too. What brings the famous Daedalus to my shores? I am honoured you would know me. His voice was steady as a west wind, warm and constant. I come as a messenger from your sister. She is with child, and her time approaches. She asks that you attend her delivery. I eyed him. Are you certain you've come to the right place, messenger? There has never been love between my sister and me. She does not send to you for love, he said. The breeze blew, carrying the scent of linden flowers. At its back, the muddy stink of the pigs. I'm told my sister has bred 6 children, each more easily than the last. She cannot die in childbirth, and her infants thrive with the strength of her blood. So why does she need me? He spread his hands, deft-looking, thickened with muscle. Pardon, lady, I can say no more, but she bids me tell you that if you do not help her, there is no one else who can. It is your art she wants, lady. Yours alone. So Pasiphae had heard of my powers and decided that they could be of use to her. It was the first compliment I had had from her in my life. Your sister instructed me to say besides that she has permission from your father for you to go. Your exile is lifted for this. I frowned. This was all strange, very strange. What was important enough to make her go to my father? And if she needed more magic, why not summon Perseus? It seemed like some sort of trick, but I couldn't understand why my sister would bother. I was no threat to her. I could feel myself being tempted. I was curious, of course, but it was more than that. This was a chance to show her what I'd become. Whatever trap she might set, she could not catch me in it. Not anymore. What a relief to hear of my reprieve, I said. I cannot wait to be freed from my terrible prison. The terraced hills around us glowed with spring. He did not smile. There is one more thing. I'm instructed to tell you that our path lies through the straits. What straits? But I saw the answer in his face, the dark stains under his eyes, the weary grief. Sickness rose in my throat. Where Scylla dwells. He nodded. She ordered you to come that way as well? She did. How many did you lose? 12, he said. We were not fast enough. How could I have forgotten who my sister was? She would never just ask a favour. She must always have a whip to drive you to her will. I could see her bragging and laughing to Minos. Circe is a fool for mortals, I hear. I hated her more than I ever had. It was all so cruelly done. I imagined stalking into my house, slamming the door on its great hinge. Too bad, Pasiphae. You will have to find some other fool. But then 6 more men, or 12, would die. I scoffed at myself. Who said they would live if I went? I knew no spells to ward off monsters, and Scylla would be enraged when she saw me. I would only bring more of her fury upon them. Daedalus was watching me, his face shadowed. Far beyond his shoulder, my father's chariot was slipping into the sea. In the dusty palace rooms, astronomers were even now tracking its sunset glory, hoping their calculations would hold. Their bony knees trembled, thinking of the headsman's axe. I gathered up my clothes, my bag of simples. I closed the door behind me. There was nothing else to do. The lion could take care of herself. I'm ready, I said. The ship's style was new to me, trim and low in the water. Its hull was beautifully painted with rolling waves and curving dolphins, and by the stern an octopus stretched its snaky arms. As the captain hauled at the anchor, I walked up to the prow to examine the figurehead I had seen. It was a young girl in a dancing dress. Her face bore a look of happy surprise, eyes wide, lips just parting, her hair loose over her shoulders. Her small hands were clasped to her chest, and she was poised on her toes as if music were about to start. Each detail of it, the curls of her hair, the folds of cloth, was so vivid that I thought at any moment she truly would step into the air. Yet that was not even the real miracle. The work showed, I cannot say how, a glimpse of the girl's self, the searching cleverness in her gaze, the determined grace of her brow, her excitement and innocence easy and green as grass. I did not have to ask whose hands had shaped it. A wonder of the mortal world. My brother had called Daedalus, but this was a wonder in any world. I pored over its pleasures, finding a new one every moment, the small dimple in her chin, the knob of her ankle, coltish with youth. A marvel it was, but also a message. I had been raised at my father's feet, and knew and boasted power when I saw it. Another king, if he had such a treasure, he'd keep it under guard in his most fortified hall. Minos and Pasiphae had set it on a ship exposed to brine and sun, to pirates and sea-wrack and monsters, as if to say, this is a trifle, we have 1,000 more, and better yet, the man who makes them. The drum beat drew my attention away. The sailors had taken their benches, and I felt the first judders of motion. The harbour waters began to slide past us. My island dwindled behind. I turned my eye to the men filling the deck around me. There were 38 in all. At the stern, 5 guards paced in capes and golden armour. Their noses were lump and twisted from too many breakings. I remembered Aeetes sneering at them. Minos' thugs, dressed up like princes. The rowers were the pick of Knossos' mighty navy, so large that oars looked dainty in their hands. Around them the other sailors moved swiftly, raising a canopy to keep off the sun. At Minos and Pasiphae's wedding, the huddle of mortals I had glimpsed seemed distant and blurred, as like as leaves on a tree. But here, beneath the sky, each face was relentlessly distinct. This one was thick, this one smooth, this one bearded with a hooked nose and narrow chin. These were scars and calluses and scrapes, nose and age lines, and cowlicks of hair. One had draped a wet cloth around his neck against the heat. Another wore a bracelet made by childish hands, and a third had a head shaped like a bullfinch's. It made me dizzy to realize that this was but a fraction of all the man the world had bred. How could such variation endure, such endless iteration of minds and faces? Did the earth not go mad? "May I bring you a seat?" Daedalus said. I turned, glad for the respite of his single face. Daedalus could not have been called handsome, but his features had a pleasing sturdiness. "I prefer to stand," I said, gesturing to the prow-piece. "She is beautiful." He inclined his head, a man used to such compliments. "Thank you. Tell me something. Why does my sister have you under watch?" When we had stepped on board, the largest guard, the leader, had roughly searched him. "Ah," he smiled slightly. "Minos and Pasiphae fear that I do not fully appreciate the hospitality. I remember Aeetes saying, Pasiphae has him trapped." "Surely you might have escaped them on the way." "I might escape them often, but Pasiphae has something of mine. I will not leave." I waited for more, but it did not come. His hands rested on the rail. The knuckles were battered, the fingers hatched with white nicks of scars, as though he had plunged them into broken wood or shards of glass. "In the straits," I said, "you saw Scylla." "Not clearly. The cliff was hidden in spray and fog, and she moved too quickly. 6 heads, striking twice, with teeth as long as a leg." I had seen the stains on the deck. They had been scrubbed, yet the blood had soaked deep. All that was left of 12 lives. My stomach twisted with guilt, as Pasiphae had meant it to. "You should know I was the one who did it," I said, "the one who made Scylla what she is. That is why I'm exiled, and why my sister had you take this route." I watched his face of surprise or disgust, even terror, but he only nodded. "She told me." Of course she had. She was a poisoner at heart. She wanted to be sure I came as villain, not saviour. Except this time, it was nothing but the truth. "There is something I do not understand," I said. "For all my sister's cruelty, she is not often foolish. Why would she risk you on this errand?" "I earned my place here myself. I'm forbidden to say more. But when we arrive in Crete, I think you will understand." He hesitated. "Do you know if there's anything we can do against her, Scylla?" Above us, the sun burned away the last shreds of cloud. The men panted, even under the canopy. "I don't know," I said. "I will try." We stood in silence beside that leaping girl as the sea fell away. That night, we camped on the shore of a flourishing green land. Around their fires, the men were tense and quiet, muffled by dread. I could hear their whispers, the wine sloshing as they passed it. No men wanted to lie awake imagining tomorrow. Daedalus had marked out a small space for me with a bedroll, but I left it. I could not bear to be hemmed in by all those breathing, anxious bodies. It was strange to tread upon earth other than my own. Where I expected a grove, there came a deer thicket. Where I thought there would be pigs, a badger showed its teeth. The terrain was flatter than my island, the forests low, the flowers in different combinations. I saw a bitter almond tree, a flowered cherry. My fingers itched to harvest the fat power. I bent and plucked a poppy just to hold its colour in my hand. I could feel the throb of its black seeds. Come, make us into magic. I did not obey. I was thinking of Scylla, trying to piece together an image from everything I had heard of her. 6 mouths, 6 heads, 12 dangling feet. But the more I tried, the more it slipped away. Instead, I saw her face as it had been in our halls, round and laughing. The curve of her wrist had been like a swan's neck. Her chin would tilt delicately to whisper some morsel of gossip in my sister's ear. Beside them, my brother Perseus had sat smirking. He used to toy with Scylla's hair, winding it around his finger. She would turn and slap his shoulder, and the sound would echo across the hall. They both laughed, for they loved to be at the centre, always, and I remembered wondering why my sister did not mind such displays, for she allowed none near Perseus but herself. Yet she only watched and smiled. I thought I had passed those years in my father's halls, sightless as a mole, but now more details came back to me. The green robe Scylla used to wear at special feasts, the silver sandals with lapis lazuli on the strap. There was a gold pin with a cat at its end that kept her hair up from her neck. She had it from Thebes? I thought Thebes of Egypt. Some admirer there, some beast-headed god. What had happened to that bauble? Was it still laying on the grass beside the water, with her discarded clothes? I had come to a small rise, crowded with black poplars. I walked among their furrowed trunks. One of them had been struck recently by lightning, and the bole bore a charred, oozing wound. I put my finger to the burned sap. I could feel its force, and was sorry I had not brought an extra bottle to gather it. It made me think of Daedalus, that upright man with fire in his bones.